Hi, this is Linda Abraham with Accepted. I'm going to be moderating today's webinar, not presenting for a change. I have a different role. I'm very excited about it. But before we get started, I want to encourage you to, first of all, if you're not in an open office, and then if you are and you wouldn't be embarrassed by the following, to get up and do some jumping jacks, jog in place, do whatever. Let's get some blood flowing, okay? Because we don't want you to be too passive during the webinar. So again, just move a little bit, and after you do those jumping jacks or jogging in place for about 30 seconds, what I'd like you to do is head on over to facebook.com/accepted, and at the top you'll see an announcement starting in 10 minutes, if it's starting now, career strategy for MBA applicants, what you need to know and do before you arrive on campus. If you have friends who are applying to MBA programs just like you, who you think would benefit from this webinar, and I'm sure it's going to be an outstanding one, given the qualifications of our host and his speaking ability, then by all means share that announcement with your friends. Anybody whom we can see sharing or liking that post, we will send a free copy of MBA Admissions for Smarties. So if we can get a hold of you. All right, so please share. Ooh, good. We're getting some good sharing going on. Thank you, Manoj. That's great. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to go and share? And then remember, you want to do a little exercise before we start. You settle in for an outstanding webinar. So get a little exercise, do a little sharing, and then we're gonna start in just about 1 minute. Okay. Let's get. Anybody else want to share? Again, we will send a free copy of MBA Admissions for Smarties. Anybody doing the sharing? All right. Thank you. Aria, and my apologies to anybody whose name I mispronounced at any point in the webinar. All right, with that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Ivan Kerbel. I met Ivan several years ago at an AGAC conference when he was presenting on behalf of Yale as the director of Yale's Career Services Office. But today, Ivan is the CEO of Practice LLC, an educational services firm that conducts an intensive annual pre-orientation program for newly admitted MBAs, the Practice MBA Summer Forum. Ivan served previously as director of the Career Development Office at the Yale School of Management and as senior associate director at Wharton's MBA Career Management Office. He is a Wharton MBA alumnus and a former management consultant at Katzenbach Partners, a New York City strategy consulting boutique. Ivan can be reached via LinkedIn or at ivan.kerbel@practicemba.com. Now, Ivan had asked me if I could just ask you, the attendees today, to get a little bit more information about you before we start. And I would like to, first of all, ask you, where geographically are you? And if you could just respond in the question window and give us an idea of where you're at, where you are physically. What city, state, country? We don't want you to be passive today. Please let us know where you're at. Ah, Chicago, Illinois. Great. India. Wonderful. Welcome. Delhi. Good. Pune, India. Good. Los Angeles. All right. Dallas. Webster, New York. All right. So we have a pretty international. I think we have basically India and the United States. Anybody else? Bangalore. All right. Welcome from wherever you're at. Thank you for joining us. All right. With that, one more question. We would also like to know, and for this I'm going to actually launch a poll, where are you at in the application process? All right, let's launch this. Did you apply round one? Did you apply to some programs round one and are planning to apply round two? Planning to apply round 2 and 3? Or planning ahead for next year, or just plain old unsure? That should apply to most of you. All right. Let's get a few more people voting. A little bit more participation. Let's go. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So 8% applied round 1. It says 0% applied round 1 and round 2, but I think that's an error. 25% are planning to apply round 2 and 3, and 50% round planning ahead for next year. I suspect there's something wrong with these results. It doesn't sound right to me or match what I remember seeing when the poll was open. But we're gonna forge ahead, and I'm going to turn it over to Ivan and take it away.
Great, everyone. Well, I know that Linda will monitor whether I'm audible and all of you can hear me. But I wanted to welcome you and thank you also for taking your time. I know you're all incredibly busy. I know you're at different stages of considering pursuing an MBA. Some of you have your torpedoes in the water, as the Navy metaphor goes, and are waiting to hear about decisions. Others of you are just now in the thick of application process or just planning to become MBAs. So an early welcome also for all of you in terms of joining a community of MBA graduates, and I hope that this will be useful to you. One of the key aspects and reasons that Linda and I decided this would be a good presentation to create and to give is that normally, traditionally, students have put a lot of time and energy and effort in the process of applying. They've then, heard from schools, interviewed, received decisions, decided where to go, and then there's literally traditionally has been a 3 to 6 month gap in which, nothing essentially happens on the business school front until students then show up for orientation and the start of the school year. That's beginning to change. In part, schools are taking more of an effort to push things out to students earlier in the school year, but also companies and a number of other organizations are beginning to organize pre-MBA, pre-orientation programs, and there's a whole ecosystem of activities and enrichment programs and professional pursuits that are really important to know about as you also critically begin to prepare for your MBA recruiting process and how to sort of actualize the plan that you might have written about in your essays. We're going to have a question and answer period at the end, so if you have thoughts along the way, jot down what you'd like to ask, and please do ask at the end. It feels really sort of anonymous otherwise, so I would love to hear some of your questions from wherever you're located. And I should also say, I've done my cardiovascular exercises, and so I'm very energized and hyped up at the moment. But I'll try not to go too fast, and I hope that you will, not multitask and check your Facebook account too many times during the process, because I think this is important information, and I hope that you'll also pick up a pen and paper and jot down a few notes. Though Linda and I have also agreed that we'll post this presentation and be able to forward it to you as well if you're interested afterward. Without further ado, this is a 10-slide presentation. It's incredibly short, so it's not meant to be overwhelming. This image on the front is the University Library at the University of Washington in Seattle, just to let you know what that is, and let's jump right into it. So we're going to first take a mental leap and forget that you're thinking about applying to business school, or that you're applying, or that you're waiting to hear. You've been admitted. You're going to your dream school. It's several months from now that you have to show up on campus. You're going to think about renting an apartment. You're going to decide whether to have roommates or not. You will quit your job at some point. You will potentially travel and see friends. There's a sort of a predictable timeline, but the important thing about it is that you have a lot of freedom and choice at this point, and you also have a number of things that once you do decide which business school you're going to attend and make that financial commitment and send that deposit check, you have an incredible opportunity to then do a number of things that will make, especially the first year of business school, a smoother experience and just a stage on which you can perform better across all of the dimensions that performance is important in business school. If there's one concept from this slide or from this general presentation I would like you to take away, and for those of you taking notes, write this down, it's that you need a pre-matriculation strategy. don't wait till you arrive on campus to start getting all of your materials organized about what sorts of companies, industries you're interested in, which business school alumni from the same school you'd like to contact, which conferences you'd like to attend, what clubs you'd like to join, what electives you plan to take after you've done the core. You know, pretty much all of that information is discoverable online, and you can really begin to do a great job of it in advance of the period of time in which you have much less time and freedom on your hands to do that sort of stuff. By the way, some people do just show up for business school. You know, maybe that's a recommended strategy for people who are undergraduate business majors, have worked at elite bulge bracket banks, management consulting firms. You know, when I went to business school at Wharton, one of my classmates already had an MBA from another school, which made me sort of wonder why he was getting another one. But if that's the situation in your life, yeah, perhaps, you know, take a 4-month vacation, you know, get off the grid, read all of the fiction that you've been wanting to catch up on. If that's not the description of the situation you're in, then assuming that you can wait till the start of business school to get everything organized and ready can be a risky proposition. So, you know, one of the things that my firm does, and one of the things that you should do as individuals, is essentially expand the front end of the school year, expand the MBA process to include this pre-matriculation period of time between the point at which you're admitted and decide which school you're going to and the point at which school starts. There are a number of aspects and elements of business school. Just to give you one example, when I was a first-year MBA, a whole weekend in the fall of the first year of school was taken up for a number of students who went to New York City or did an on-campus program that taught them financial modeling skills via Excel. For those students, that was very important to do. That sort of training and that sort of learning, whether it's from a vendor that aggregates specific other programs or provides online information, all of that stuff is available before business school. And doing that during business school really does take time away from unique opportunities that you're only going to have in that environment. When you're at business school, you can take professors out to lunch. You can meet with recruiters. You can spend time with classmates. You'll have an enormous homework load. You'll have a lot to do on the recruiting front. So anything that is akin to a touch typing skill or a sort of a building block, a foundational skill for success in business school, if you expand the school year and extract those elements into the pre-MBA time zone, you will do yourself a great service in terms of having more time on your hands to do unique things once you're on business school. I think it's the most critical, the most limited resource you have as an MBA is time. Ask your friends who are MBA alums and graduates how important this is and how much being time crunched in terms of all of your commitments and obligations in business school is the one major factor driving everyone's decision process as MBAs. It's really very true, and it's universal across business schools. I also think there are ways to prepare and think about extracurriculars, academics, the whole aspect of your business school experience. But let's focus on the career planning part, because this is what we're here to do, and because that is such a major driver of your interest in business school. I should say, after this slide, there may be 2 or 3 more slides that have relevant information, but if you were to print out and tack on your wall any one slide from this presentation, this is it. I think you can think of this as a checklist, and if you are looking at this slide 2 months from now, 7 months from now, a year from now when you're in business school, you can literally check off these things and say, have I done an adequate job? Would I give myself an A+, B-, C+ on any of these factors? I'm sure someone could think of a list that has 11 bullets or 9 bullets or 15 bullets, but I think these are fundamentally, if you get all of these components together, then you do in fact have a pre-matriculation MBA job search strategy, and you will be well prepared to hit the ground running when school starts. But let me explain to you what each piece is. And I should also say, each one of these bullets, one could spend an hour just discussing what that individual bullet entails. But I think you will come to understand and know about all of that stuff. So this is a way to sort of say, these are the labels and these are the things you must do. And all of you are incredibly bright, and you will figure out what each of the subcategories of action and tasks are for each bullet. So the first one, and this may or may not be an obvious one, but most people write their business school essays as a vehicle for being admitted to business school. For some folks, that is actually their MBA career plan. For other folks, not necessarily. And I think the thing that you must do is first recognize there are a number of instruments out there, Myers-Briggs, Type Indicator, Career Leader. There are a number of career self-assessment instruments that have been designed for MBAs, some of them not designed for MBAs, that are really valuable, especially if you do an exercise of triangulating between any of the results of those instruments, your resume and personal work experiences and educational background, and the third point, the unique opportunities and career path that you will have given the specific business school you're planning to attend. You can acquire some of these materials in advance from your school. Sometimes they will, in fact, ask you to complete some of these self-assessment instruments before you show up for the first day of classes. Knowing that they're out there allows you to send an email after the point of admission and deciding to matriculate that says, how many of these things can I do in advance? Can I do my resume via the Kellogg resume template for their MBAs, et cetera, et cetera. It's an important thing, and the bullet, therefore, is knowing yourself and being able to use that to essentially get to bullet 10 at the end, which is creating a very specific story about why you fit in for a specific position, more so than any other MBA, why that company is the one company more so than any other company you should work for, and why is there no better time, at no other point in your career life, does it make as compelling sense to join that employer as now. So bullet 1 ultimately connects you to bullet 10, and in between there's a lot of meaty process. Bullets 2 and 3, that the language is similar, and it says interact with current and past peers, colleagues, and mentors. And the next one is interact with future peers, colleagues, and mentors. I very specifically put these bullets next because I think it's more important to interact with people as you create an MBA search strategy and execute on that plan than it is to do anything else. So more important than reading research materials or keeping up with the news or doing any of the other things in here, there's really a mandate to reach out to people and do two things. So the first is there's a set of people who you currently know, who you work with, who are your family members, who are your friends, people who've known you since you were a young kid, an adolescent, a young adult. With all of those people, the point at which some of them are your recommenders, others know that you're applying to business school. When you get to the point of being admitted and deciding to go to school, I would really create a list and touch base with each one of those people and say, great news, I'm going to Michigan, or I'm going to Berkeley, or I'm going to UVA or Yale. They are essentially, think of them as kind of people will say it's a sort of a personal advisory board. They're people who can sort of serve to give you a echolocation and sonar and give you feedback that might be really quite useful to you when you get to moments of indecisiveness or pressure or frustration, because they care about you, they've known about you for a long time, and they have a sense of your skills and abilities and interests, all of that stuff in bullet number 1 that is independent of all of the chaos and the options and the rich opportunities that you'll encounter in business school. So with all of those people, say, I'm heading to business school X, I think I'm going to explore opportunities in careers Y, would love to stay in touch and let you know how that's going, and I'm very excited about it. And what you're essentially doing is you're also prepping and teeing up some of those relationships and contacts to be an integral part of your application process. So whether those people are providing additional recommendations for you, or a good word in your on your behalf when you're applying to jobs, or they're providing information about a specific company or a specific role, or you realize via LinkedIn that they're your connecting point to somebody you'd like to contact at a company or another kind of organization. It's really critical that you don't forget the fact that you're part of a network and a community of people, and don't leave them behind as you go off to business school. Now, bullet number 3, this is the same call to action, but it's with all of the people that you are about to meet and encounter and make your friends and connections and lifelong contacts in some cases. Via Facebook and a number of different other vehicles, you will quickly figure out who your classmates are after they've also decided, yay, I'm attending the same business school. I think the call here is, without being robotic and artificial and kind of salesman-y about it, you really should be as organized as you possibly can about who you're meeting, what they know, what their expertise is, what their interest in you is, and all of those relationships will also be a huge part of your progression in your MBA job search. And no one of these groups, classmates, faculty, staff, alumni, employers, there's no one that's more important than another. And you never know. When I found out about the consulting firm that I joined as an MBA intern and then as a full-time MBA associate, I heard about that opportunity from a classmate, and I just may not have noticed it on my own. But a classmate of mine said, hey, you're really interested in this topic. Here's a firm that does this work. And it was just, it was a key light bulb, sort of critical moment, that, life-changing inflection point. And you never know in advance when those moments are and who is going to bring them about. And so even at the point of, spring of 2014, you can begin to research, you'll be at welcome weekends, you'll begin to discover and meet your classmates, but you can also begin to research who are the faculty members, who's the head of MBA career services, who's the head of external relations, who's the head of alumni affairs, who are the key employer captains, the MBA team captains that are assigned to my school? Can the second years tell me that? Can the club leaders tell me that? Also, who are the new generation of club leaders that are elected in the coming springtime for the next year, for 2-year MBA programs, the sort of the rising second years? In many of those cases, I have a recommendation. It's a 2-point recommendation. It's always okay to reach out to people, point number 1, even if there's no specific request or no specific inquiry at that moment. So you don't have to set up a phone conversation or a coffee chat, or you don't have to have a specific question about, does your company hire MBAs? You can just say, I found your profile, very interested in the work you do. I'm very excited to be joining the community of MBAs who are also attending school X, and would love to stay in touch with you and potentially be in contact again further down the line. That's a really easy, quote-unquote, ask to say yes to, and it's really terrific to actually reach out to people at a point in time when you don't actually require their help, time, expertise, recommendation, connections. Just sort of saying hello is a really important thing to do. And again, you can do a lot of that before you show up on campus. I should also say you should have a pretty strong idea of which faculty members you want to study with when you get to the point of potentially choosing a major, taking electives, potentially pursuing independent studies. It's remarkable how late in the game people, usually the night before they have to register for classes, they're busy looking at the course catalog and faculty reviews. Quite often that information, second years, people you meet throughout the process, they're willing to share it with you in advance. And of course, you can look at faculty research online, you can read their works. They can sometimes play a prominent part in students' career path as advisors, as mentors, as recommenders. Whether or not companies ask faculty members for their opinion on specific candidates, and some have a policy about only giving positive recommendations, never giving sort of negative recommendations. It really, this whole ecosystem of people, you've got two halves of it, the current and past and the future and you know, present when you're in business school. And this is up at the top of this slide because this is really one of the most critical things. You have to reach out to people. You have to establish those connections. If you are generally a person who doesn't like to do that, if your preference is for more introversion and it takes a little bit more activation energy for you to reach out to those folks, then put that as one of the skills and sort of personal development, personal growth to-do items on your master to-do list. Because I think one really can't be an MBA without doing bullets number 2 and 3. And again, they're important, and that's why they're up there. Bullet number 4, you know, for me is a key one, and I know it's kind of silly that I'm like, bullet number 4 is the most important thing in the world, but I think every MBA decision about which job offer to accept, about which opportunity to apply to, about which interview to choose if there's an interview conflict and they have to drop one interview and stick with another, you know, I can count on my fingers, and I tell students, you know, there's only 3 things that matter whenever you're considering any role, whether that role is at a 4-person Silicon Valley startup or whether that role is, you know, MBA summer associate at Boston Consulting Group. And the 3 factors are what's the industry, what's the function, and what is the organization. You know, who works there, where is it, what is it about. The organization is quite often really a people question. Who's your direct supervisor going to be? What's the talent, training, and background of that person, and who are your peers? But to back up to the first 2 aspects, any time that you spend time in any industry, you have greater domain expertise in that industry. So if you work in mobile telephony for T-Mobile or Telstra or AT&T, the more you do that, whether it's a 10-week summer or a year or 2, the more you are a, you know, mobile phone telephony person. There's an aspect here of domain expertise that over time can really allow you to charge a rent on your specialized labor. So the first most important thing is, do you like an industry? And if you had to be in it forever, could you be in it forever? Function is also important because it's not tied to industry. I can say, you know, I want to be a digital media expert, but I could be a digital media expert for Time Warner, for HBO, for a consulting firm, for a private equity firm. You know, there are many ways to sort of be strong at that function and that type of expertise. An organization, again, is, you know, who are you being trained by? Who are you learning from? Who's going to write your performance review, and do they have a totally opposite Myers-Briggs type than you do? In advance of showing up on campus, you should have a pretty solid lock on, I'm down to 2 industries, if possible. You know, maybe there's a third there. I'm down to, you know, a couple of functions. You know, I very rarely see MBAs who succeed if their starting point is, I'm going for finance, and I'm going for consulting, and I'm going for CPG jobs, and of course I'm interested in private equity, and maybe I want to join a hedge fund as well. So that process of whittling down and culling what's most important to you can start in advance, and the onus is on you to do that research. You know, you'll have industry primers, you'll have orientation, there's a bunch of other things you can do, but it's really incumbent upon you to, you know, not wait till you're in business school to find out what private wealth management is, but look it up in advance and figure out if it's something you're interested in. An organization, that last bit has a lot to do with fit, and again, remember, if it's, you know, a year from now and you're thinking about, or a year and a few months from now and you're looking at your summer internship offer, you're going to draw a little box that says, you know, what is the industry, what is the function, and is this particular organization the type of entity and the set of people that I, you know, want to hitch my wagon to and be associated with. It really is that simple, believe it or not. A good sort of method and mechanism to analyze and compare and contrast multiple offers, multiple opportunities, multiple career paths. 5 and 6 are very MBA specific. They all point back to bullet number 4 and the sort of target industries, functions, and organizations you're looking for. And by the way, one thing, when I know that students are looking at opportunities in 2 different fields, or 2 different functions, or organizations that are really widely distributed geographically, what I say is if you're going to have a lot of buckets, make sure that you have only a few really targeted entities in each one, so that you can really arrive at the stage of writing cover letters and sending in applications and interviewing with a lot of in-depth knowledge. So if technology is one of the fields you're interested in, and CPG is one of the fields you're interested in, and maybe real estate is as well, please don't populate each one of those buckets with 20 to 30 companies that you're potentially interested in working for, because I think that is, my experience has shown that that's a pretty good recipe for failure. And if you're going to have something like 3 big, only tangentially related buckets like that, cull it down to 3 employers in each one, maybe 5 total, 3 that you're really, really focusing on, and 1 that you know more about than any other MBA in your class. And I really stress, more than any other MBA in your class, and or any other MBA that could be recruiting that year from any other business school. It's amazing how in-depth your knowledge has to be about that specific employer, and their financials and their analyst reports if they're public, and all of those details. But what will happen then when you're in business school, points 5 and 6, and these may be, bullet 5 may be very relevant to your specific business school, but you can, again, acquire this information in advance from the Career Services Office, which is, what's the MBA timeline, what's the recruiting calendar, and what's the hiring process for the industries, jobs, et cetera, that I'm interested in, that I've honed down in bullet number 4. There's some really, really critical differences here in terms of dates of application, dates of interviews. You will hear quite often students and administrators talking about, on-campus versus the independent or enterprise job search. Some industries, by default, hire very close to the time of the start of internships or full-time roles. So technology interviews may be in April or May for summer internships. Investment banking internships will be in January, just as on the earliest date possible. Again, speaking about traditional 2-year MBA programs. And it's really important for you to decide this because it really influences that entire puzzle of when you're taking on challenging assignments in terms of leading extracurricular activities, doing special projects. You can taking electives if you're going to do that. So again, you can know in advance, is the end of my springtime going to be like the big spike that I need a lot of energy and time to dedicate to traveling and interviewing and getting a job? Or is the game really January, and therefore I have to make sure that by October, November, I really have my act together and I know how to give my pitch and describe why I want to pursue this career as an MBA? Again, what's the recruiting calendar? What's the hiring process for my specific business school? I told you guys this was an important slide. I'm going through it at a totally glacial pace. Number 6 is, for each organization that hires MBAs, I think there are about 5 important questions that you have to ascertain. When I managed the Career Services Office and we sent out our staff to do business development and garner full-time internship job postings, we asked these similar set of 5 questions. And the questions are, what are the skills and abilities you're looking for in an MBA hire? So really, what's the bullet list of things that they must know and be able to do and perform to be hired? What is your MBA strategy? In other words, what's the portfolio of MBAs that you hire to undergraduates versus experienced hires versus executive or part-time MBAs? And is there an expectation of how many hires hired from which schools? Kind of what's the numbers game behind their particular MBA recruiting strategy for a given year? Then, third question, what's the talent management process? And I mean by that label kind of, it's a sort of a big label that says, what is compensation? at what time scale do promotions occur? What are the job titles? In other words, what happens in year one? What happens in year two? You go from associate to senior associate to principal to partner. Are there subdivisions of principal and partner? What does compensation look like? What does a day in the life look like at each stage? So understanding the talent management model, and then understanding any sort of specific employer relationships with your school, past experiences that will allow you to sort of connect with their recruiters and alumni from your school who are working for them. So bullet number 6 is for the industry function organizations that I'm interested in bullet number 4, how do they hire MBAs? What's their process? Why do they hire MBAs? From which schools do they hire MBAs? What's expected of them? How do those MBAs do? What's compensation like? What's the work like? Content, the career progression, exit strategies. After at each stage of promotion in consulting, for example, for the big strategy generalist consulting firm, about half of the workforce goes to a client or launches other projects or does something else. So knowing that at each stage of promotion, 50% of the staff goes off to do something else is a really important thing to know if you're looking for an employer who you may want the opposite from. I'd like a job where I can stay for 5-10 years, really build a reputation, and then have responsibility for a business unit and true leadership role further down the line. So that's bullets 5 and 6. And they point back to some pretty important legwork that you have to do in bullet number 4. In bullet number 7, I think MBAs sometimes forget that they are themselves joining a company. They're joining an organization, which is a business school, that may have really very specific core strengths, unique capabilities, geographical advantages, various, pockets of expertise, people, know-how that might be really relevant to what you're trying to do. So, for example, if you go to business school and you want to be an entrepreneur, knowing that they have a venture initiation program, really important thing. And again, you can reach out and connect and introduce yourself to those people even in advance of starting business school. Number 8, it's really quite important to not go to business school while also not being a consumer of business news. I don't know of anyone who is a business school graduate, whether they work in the public sector, in nonprofits, in the private sector, who doesn't, to some extent, pay attention to the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Fortune, the Financial Times, more industry-specific journals, blogs. They follow specific thought leaders on LinkedIn. If you're somebody who doesn't already do this, you will only be able to be successful as an MBA if you do at some point do it. The earlier you start doing it, the better, because you will have less time to cram that information into your brain when you are, busy preparing for an interview, while completing a marketing final, while, traveling to another city to go to an MBA conference. Bullet number 9, and I hope all of you writing down questions for the end, and I am trying to speed up a bit so that we can get there. Bullet number 9 is kind of important. There's a whole bunch of what I would say is quote-unquote junky stuff, things that are, you can view them as hurdles or sort of as necessary taxes or dues paying on your way to getting a job, but aren't really, companies aren't really hiring you because, wow, your resume is formatted so nicely. They're hiring you because of the unique talents and skills that you bring and the fact that you solve a business problem for them and they like you and you're going to be a great colleague. However, if your resume is not great, if it's not formatted well, if you've got a typo anywhere in there, they're not even going to have a chance to meet you, because this is such a competitive global arena for high-end business school jobs that any reason to eliminate anyone from the process, it's what you're experiencing as MBA applicants or will experience as MBA applicants. Perhaps your GMAT score is not the ultimate deciding factor in how successful you will be as a business person, but it certainly is a litmus test for how badly you want to go, and are you willing to put in sort of the blood, sweat, and tears to get there. So the tools of job searching are this whole sort of panoply of topics. Cover letters, interviews. Do I have to know how to pitch a stock in an interview? Will I have a case interview? Will the interview be team-based? What are coffee chats? What's a successful coffee chat? What's an unsuccessful coffee chat? What sorts of questions are okay? What sorts of questions are not okay? There's a whole world of expertise that exists in the Career Services Office in second years that will come from employers and alumni. And you've got to be good at the job of getting a job. And whether you want to or not is sort of beside the point, because whether you want to take the GRE or the GMAT or not doesn't really matter if that's sort of an intrinsic hurdle that you have to clear, and you have to sort of hurdle with flying colors in order to then let people have an opportunity to truly get to know you and decide that you're a great person and hire you. So you got to be good at getting a job. Think of it as an invisible credit unit or two on top of your already pretty substantial course load, and make sure that you get good at it. And again, that sort of stuff can begin in advance of starting business school. You can email the admissions office, the career services office, and acquire any of the sort of guides, tools, any prep that they have that they're willing to share with you in advance. Again, doing it in the summer in a relatively more relaxed mode is better than doing it in a huge hustle during the school year. And last, after you get through all of this stuff, the process is really, I hope it doesn't sound trite, but you really are telling a story. At the end of the day, even if you're doing a lot of math tests and a lot of break-even analysis and market sizing in a case interview, at the end of the day, you're transmitting a story about who you are, where you've been, where you want to go in life, and why that's just the best, most unique possible match with what a company needs, who they are, what their competitive landscape is like, and why now is like the moment where you have to apply yourself and your talent to their needs and their business operation. So, that was a lot to say about one slide, but if there's one from this presentation that I think you should print out and keep in the back of some notebook during business school, this is it. And by the way, you're also all welcome to email me at any point in your current and future lives and ask me about clarification on any of these bullets or all of the sub-bullet tasks that are implicit in each one. To move along and to really get a bit more speedy, there are additional factors here, and I think this slide can sort of speak for itself, so I'm not going to go to it through it at great length, but there are a number of things that are just healthy, good tips to keep in mind. You're coming up with a summer internship and then a full-time job after business school. You're not coming up with a solution for the meaning of life and who you are as a human being, and I think a lot of business school students really beat themselves up to sort of solve the master equation for the meaning of life as MBAs, and really you just need to get the next job. You need to be on the right trajectory, and you need to be doing something that fits who you are and what you plan to do with yourself, but you don't need to be obsessive. You do need to be obsessive, and I use the word ruthless because it's a good one, and disciplined about how you allocate your time and energy during school. And if you don't have a time plan, a Gantt chart for the different months of the school year and how you're going to tackle each one strategically, I think you're more like a passenger, a swimmer in the middle of a river with a lot of boulders and a lot of rapids, and you want to exercise as much control as you can. You do need to understand all of the, the specifics of how companies recruit at your business school, which companies come on campus, which require you to burn up a lot of shoe leather and pursue on your own. You need to think about school holidays, long weekends. You need to have a plan for networking, phone calls. I mean, people literally budget, I need to have 2 to 3 phone calls per week with an alumnus. Not meaningless phone calls, not, hey, I'm just getting on the phone because it says on my list that I should have 3 calls a week. But, if you decide that you need to engineer 3 substantial, meaningful conversations per week in order to really become an expert in the industry you might be trying to get into, then you've got a plan and you have something to stick to, which is better than kind of saying, oh, I should really be sort of contacting alumni and, By the way, I don't recommend the shotgun approach. I don't recommend sending 100 emails per day, to people who you barely looked at their profiles. And, you have to, each person who receives a message from you has to realize why they're getting a message as opposed to anyone else who works at the same company, as opposed to anyone else who's an alumnus of the same school. So this is not a recipe for, become a spam robot. It's a recipe for having a strategy that has high volume, potentially concentrated, focused, meaningful effort, and sticking to it. Academics are an important part. At schools that have great non-disclosure, it could still be an important part. Their teaching assistant opportunities, their independent study, making it on the dean's list. There's all sorts of ways to signal I'm a high-achieving, bright person who can do quite well in a rigorous academic curriculum, and it might be your strategy to leverage that. It might be your strategy to leverage extracurricular opportunities and show what you can do by becoming a club leader, by managing a conference, by joining student government. Again, all of that stuff can be tied back to your career search. It can enhance your job search strategy. It can both make you realize you really love or you really hate the thing that you were researching, and assuming that you've got the right match, it can highlight your true dedication, abilities, and commitment. So it's important to think holistically about that. Entrepreneurship, there's a lot to pack in here, but this is perhaps for another conversation. There's very, very specific advice about how to go about new venture initiation as an MBA. And there are a lot of tips and advice out there that I happen to think are wrong. So this is perhaps for another time, or if you join the Practice MBA Summer Forum. But there's some very specific things you need to do if you're considering entrepreneurship. There's some very specific things you need to do if you are going to avoid a herd mentality. The famous quote is, I decided to go for my roommate's dream job because he or she was talking so much about that experience. I said, oh, I would also love to do that. So it's really difficult at schools that are, big powerhouses in finance to not be interested in finance as well. So you have to sort of control, and keep the signal-to-noise ratio good. There's a lot to unpack in the next 3 bullets as well. If you're an international student, and admissions officers will not really ever, spend much time on this, but you're going to have a harder time finding a job than domestic students. If I went to Sweden to business school next month, I wouldn't expect to have as easy a time as Swedes would in finding a job in Stockholm. So you may be doing a 2-country job search. Again, the important thing is all of the people you think you may need to talk to further down the line when you're looking at internship or full-time job opportunities, why not talk to them now when you're still in your home city rather than in Chicago or New York or somewhere in Europe? So that to-do list of interacting and outreach and communication for the 2-country job search that international students, I think, are almost required to do. Very important to start before you get to business school because you're in the wrong geography for all of the networking that you need to do back home, including with alumni from your own business school. That means you also, the onus is on you to become an expert on sponsorship and work visa rules. Again, you're your own best client. There are going to be resources, there are going to be staff members who can help you, but you've got to be the smart one driving how all of this works and what happens when companies say they don't hire international students, but hey, how did that person get hired from the class of 2011? Same for students who are sponsored. There's much to do now in managing that relationship, and quite often you can experiment with your summer internship and do something completely different when you return. And I think with, this could be a longer bullet list. I think the thing to keep in mind is with any experience or interaction or encounter, keep in mind what the other party's needs are, what they think, what they feel. It's very easy as an MBA to really sort of acquire tunnel vision and become, very focused on what your situation is, the ups and downs of that. I guess if I had to add just one bit of just overarching wisdom, it's try to look at every single situation from the perspective of the other party, whether that other party is a classmate, faculty member, alumnus, employer. I'll give you one illustrative example. I've known MBAs to call and leave messages on the answering machines of employer contacts that they're interested in setting up a time with at a time when they know those people won't be there. So calling somebody on a weekend to leave a voicemail that says, hey, I'd like to find a time to touch base with you is a way of saying, I don't mind making you spend 2-3 minutes listening to a voicemail on a Monday morning, and I really wasn't trying to reach you. That's why I called you on a Sunday. So really think about the perspective of the other party and what's convenient and easy for them in every situation, rather than what's convenient and easy for you, just as a general tip. Now, I promised Linda that I'd also talk a bit about, this ecosystem of pre-orientation, pre-MBA activities. You can read this slide at better length later on. Let me just sort of say what the big categories are. There are a number of professional associations and conferences that you can join and become a member of and find out about before you show up on campus. There are a number of corporate-sponsored programs, get-to-know-us weekends, primers on what the industry is like, on what marketing is like, for example. As you research those and look for opportunities, please understand that, or make an effort to find out what are the implications of participation. Some of them will, in fact, interview you for summer internships while you're there, whether they explicitly say so or whether they sort of say it's a non-evaluative experience. You may, in fact, be in the middle of MBA internship recruiting even before you've had a day of business school. That's a situation that some of you may want to be in, and it's a situation that some of you may not want to be in. You may also not want to face a situation in which you're compelled to decide about whether you're going to go with a specific company or not before you've even had a chance to see what the rest of the field is, or before other employers have had a chance to sort of say, this is who we are and this is what we can offer in terms of career paths. So be a smart consumer as far as that stuff goes, and ask people who've done the program, who go to your business school, what they thought of it. You can also do a pre-MBA custom internship on your own. You can say, oh, I'm interested in this company. I'm going to tell them that I'm about to be enrolled in business school X. I'm about to be at MIT Sloan, and I'd love to spend a month or two in advance of the start of business school doing something interesting with them. Might be kind of a quite neat career switching strategy. Again, expectations maybe a little bit lower, performance pressure, competition maybe a little bit lower. Might be kind of a neat thing to do, and I know that people do it. For international students doing language and culture transition and getting immersed in the country, business schools try to tackle this problem with various success rates. As far as the pre-orientation landscape goes, I think my firm is really the only one that is tackling this in sort of a robust manner and allowing people to arrive in country a month or more before school and really get their head around a new academic environment, new professional environment, new social environment, and all of the nuances, formal and informal, that go with that. And then there's a mix of training programs, skills building things you can do online, individually, in person. The next slide actually has a pretty complete, comprehensive list of what those opportunities are. Again, this is here. You will have access to it. Look up all of this stuff on your own and create a pre-matriculation strategy for what's important to you and pursue those opportunities. Last, you can think of all of these as either a part of your academic readiness, a part of your professional readiness, or part of your social and extracurricular readiness. So as you think about the various opportunities on the slide previous, this is the things you want to be asking about, what you will need from each one of those experiences and how to go about them. Linda mentioned my bio at the beginning, but I encourage everyone to feel free to reach out to me, to check out the website at Practice MBA. I'll give you the very brief overview of what we do, literally like a 15-second overview. We tackle the career readiness portion of being a new MBA in a really robust manner, and we do this all in person in Seattle, Washington, in July of the coming summer. We handle language and culture immersion for international students, and we handle a lot of the performance and personal and interpersonal effectiveness skills, everything from time management to Excel financial modeling training. It's the most comprehensive of the programs on that blue slide. We've run a pilot in previous summer with some HBS and Chicago Booth and Columbia MBAs, among other students. And this coming year, we're launching a full Practice MBA summer forum here in Seattle. I'm also really happy to announce something that's not on the website, but we are partnering with the National Outdoor Leadership School, or NOLS, in the coming summer to offer wilderness outdoor trip leader training programs in the Central Cascades, most likely in the Glacier Peak Wilderness, for a week's time, both at the front and at the back end of the MBA Summer Forum. And I can send you more information about that, and it will be up on our website soon as well. So there's a really fun aspect there, and I think our clientele will be limited to loosely defined the top 10 MBA programs in Western Europe and North America. So it's really a unique chance for you to do all of that prep and training and immersion, and to do it with fellow newly admitted MBAs who are about to show up for classes at Stanford, Kellogg, HBS, Wharton, Chicago, Columbia, MIT, LBS, INSEAD, and IESE. I might have left one or two out, but that's it. And I hope that you will use this information to your advantage and potentially even see us next summer in Seattle. And I think it'd be great to move on to questions if we can, and I hope that we do have a few minutes to be able to do that.
Yes, please post your questions. Ivan, I want to thank you so much. It was a very, very informative and full presentation, and I sense that you have so much more to offer that probably was hard for you to choose what to present in this 1 hour. But we do have time for questions. The feedback I'm getting from participants, from our listeners, is wonderful. For instance, Anshul wrote, really informative, appreciate it. But now it's time for your questions. I had a question. In terms of the 10 bullet point slide that you started with advice for people in terms of what they should do, is it different for people who want to go into entrepreneurship than for people who want to go into banking, consulting, and corporate positions? But in the meantime, while you're answering that, I'm hoping that some of our listeners will post questions.
Yep. So the answer is that all of those 10 bullets really do hold for entrepreneurship. I mean, even sort of the industry, function, organization question. Yeah, you know, your company, whether you started or whether you join a small startup, will be in a specific industry. You may be doing all functions at the beginning, but at some point you'll have specialists doing specialized functions. And so that slide really does hold. What's different for students interested in new venture initiation is, you know, in my personal opinion, I think you have to be very aggressive about the calendar of business school, because you essentially want to leverage business school as a seed incubator, and you don't want to wait till second semester of your second year to, you know, finish your business plan and think about finding a seed round. You want to do that stuff as early as possible in your first year. You want to try to launch in the summer instead of a summer internship. If all is going well and you get a seed round of funding, you potentially want to take a year off from school, or, you know, sort of take a leave of absence. This, I think, is a really smart strategy, because if you break away and you succeed, well, you may never have to go back to business school, and you can still claim to be a success story from that business school. But if you don't succeed, which is the majority of us, well then, guess what? Your second year MBA, you go back to finish your degree, you know, you're there for the full-time recruiting process, and you've got a great story to tell about all of the experience you gained and the knowledge and know-how in managing your startup or you know, new venture. So very important differences with regard to MBA timeline. And then there's some important things with regard to what's your background, and is business school really the right vehicle for you to be an entrepreneur or not. But those are, you know, lengthier questions. It is something we cover in the Practice MBA Summer Forum.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, we do have some good questions coming in. And again, if I mispronounce a name, please forgive me. This is Nagarjuna, and he asks, how difficult is it to change both industry and function via an MBA? Good question.
So it's a great question, and changing both industry and function is quite possible and not uncommon. And I think the rule of thumb, the thing you need to remember is you can change, you know, you're not limited to how many variables you can change, but be careful when you're changing multiple variables. So that same concept of, if you have a lot of buckets, make sure that you don't have, you know, 30 apples in each bucket, but really sort of limit and focus. So if you're changing industry, if you're changing function, if you're changing geography, if you're coming from overseas, the difficulty level has just gone up at each stage of changing another variable. And that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means you may really need to dedicate a lot of time and effort. And instead of 1 or 2 invisible credit units on top of your course load, your job hunt may be like 5 or 6 invisible credit units on top of your course load in terms of time and effort. So again, beyond that, it's all down to the individual and what they're trying to do and what their background is, and it becomes very specific to that person.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for that answer. And let's see, there's another question here. Anshul asks, how credible do you think is an MBA for a fresh graduate from an Ivy League college? In other words, somebody who graduates, let's assume, with good grades from a top school if they apply to business school. And I would ask the question both in terms of ease of getting into business school and then job opportunities after business school and the MBA experience in business. It's pretty, I'm expanding the question as I keep talking, so I better be quiet.
Yeah, I think so. I think the answer is it often really depends on what the individual is trying to do, and maybe the best way to get a handle on this question and to answer it appropriately is to say, if your reason to go to business school is because in general going to business school is a good thing and no one's going to point the finger of blame at you and say, why did you get an MBA? That's such a crazy thing to do. It's something that society accepts, society rewards. One can, to some extent, rely on having a good professional life after you go to business school. All of those things make it sort of feel like it's a no-brainer. But I think that's dangerous because it sort of feels and sounds like you're not using your brain if it's a no-brainer. And if you're applying to business schools as an Ivy League grad, out of school a year, a couple of years, and you don't really have a very compelling reason to go to business school other than can't decide what else to do, and business school sounds good, and business school is good.
Or you don't like your job. Don't forget that one.
What's that?
I said you don't like your current job, so.
Right. And so I think, if on the other hand you create a, very specific, very focused message on why this school, why a career switch, why a job switch, industry or function switch, what you want to learn, who you want to encounter, how you want to grow, if you get that very specific message, again, business schools normally admit students with anywhere from 4 to 7, roughly speaking, years of experience, but they also admit undergraduates, and they also admit people with 10 plus years of work experience. So, those people have created a very compelling message and story for why it makes sense for them to go to business school, and that's what you need to do if you feel like you may be a little bit of an outlier in terms of your profile for admission.
I just want to add to that question, we have actually a question here from somebody with relatively little work experience. We also have a question here from somebody with above average work experience. And I just want to reinforce what Ivan just said, that I think it's important for all MBA applicants, and I've said this again and again and again, probably sick of hearing it, to have a good, clear goal, which in my view means that you know what you want to do, what the role you want to perform, and the industry you want to perform it in when you graduate. It is particularly important, multiply that, for applicants who are a little bit more of an outlier in terms of the quantity of work experience, both a little bit less work experience and more work experience. For those with less work experience, the younger ones among you, and this is now from an admissions perspective, I would encourage you to think really well, long, deep, hard, whether this is the optimal time for you to go for an MBA. If you won't get a lot more out of your MBA with a year or 2 or 3 of work experience under your belt, wouldn't you be better off waiting? And the other point is that recruiters, if you look at the stats for early career applicants graduating from business school, it shows that they start their career with a significantly lower salary. Now you can say, well, they're also forgoing a significantly lower salary, so it all kind of comes out in the wash. That's true, but obviously the opportunities are somewhat more limited for them. So that's all something that you as individuals have to consider when you're considering going for an MBA, especially if you're on the younger end. Now let me go back to the questions that you folks are posing here. Elena asks, is it recommended to include all these bullets, and I assume that she's referring to the bullets that you posted at the beginning,
yep,
in a pre-application research process in order to write strong essays? I'll let you respond first, Ivan.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I have not. It hadn't occurred to me to use the bullets in this way. But that's probably because I'm not from a admissions consulting background and have more of the how to succeed in getting an MBA job rather than how to succeed in being admitted to business school mindset. But it's not a bad idea. And I think if you use these bullets as a way to organize your thoughts that feeds material into your essays, yeah, any heuristic, any tool, any instrument, if you find these 10 bullets useful, especially the fit question, that number 10, business school is a lot about how to get things done, how to do a specific calculation, how to, forgive me for the screen, how to, figure out the net present value, or do a discounted cash flow. But the real compelling questions are always whys rather than hows. Why do you want to go to business school? Why do you want to be a consultant? Why do you want to live in a new country? Any of these things, the answers to that are always very, very individual, and they're always very specific, and there's no general answer. And so if this list is a way to organize your thoughts around answering those more personal, more sort of meaningful questions, yeah, go for it. I encourage you.
Okay, from my reaction to that, because I spend an enormous amount of time thinking about what MBA applicants have to do, I would say this, that in terms of these bullets, it is particularly important from an admissions perspective that you understand bullet points 1 through 4, 7, absolutely, 8, and in 10, the story has to be how you fit at that school, and that how that school, its strengths, both in terms of its curriculum, its extracurricular activities, and its career center strengths, recruiting strengths, will help you achieve your goal as you define it in number 4, your options, your MBA roles with respect to industry, function, and organization. So this is a useful outline. It probably is a little bit more comprehensive than when you need from an admissions perspective, and some of these items could wait till after acceptance. But certainly, I'm a big believer, and this is one of the reasons I've invited Ivan to present this webinar, in applicants knowing what they want to get out of the MBA, and frankly, in any graduate applicant knowing what they want to get from the degree. So let's see if we can't do one more question, because we're running over a little bit. I really appreciate your patience, but I think Ivan had such good material to present. Let's see. Devendra asks, and again, considering the number of international applicants we have here today, for international students, career development is different in different countries. Does that add to the challenges? And do you have any different advice for international people who want to work outside the U.S. after this?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, it's very different. And even when you look at something very basic like a resume, in many Asian countries, you submit resumes that have, a photograph, marital status, personal information. In the U.S., in our legal landscape, employers are in fact forbidden by law from asking a candidate whether he or she is married. There are a range of protected categories in our country, for example, that try to limit the amount of discrimination that could potentially happen. Oh, we don't want to hire somebody who's married because that person can't work as hard and will have too many family obligations. Or the other end of the spectrum, oh, we do want to hire somebody who's married because that person has a stable life and they can really make a commitment and they'll live in one place for a long time. So in the U.S., there's some important differences, and I would say important differences also in the U.K., in France, in Spain, across a range of countries that influence everything from what's on your resume to how do you address somebody in a cover letter. Is it Dear Ivan or is it Dear Mr. Kerbel? Which one is kind of the more appropriate form of contact if you've never met somebody? And I think just recognizing that, yes, a lot of, shaking hands, handing business cards, writing an email, composing your resume can be very different and can be very specific to the context of your particular host business, host country business school environment. Is sort of a wake-up call to do something about it in advance. There are a number of interesting books about cultural differences that can give people a lot of a leg up. One of the things that we're really hoping with our program, I'm assuming that more than half of the people who join us in Washington State and Seattle next summer will be from overseas, and that will essentially be on the way to business school for them. I think there's nothing like showing up in a country and seeing what's on television and interacting with people at the coffee shop when you order a bagel as a way to really limit the sort of culture shock and the number of things you have to learn while you're at the same time surviving the MBA course load and going to company presentations and doing team projects and doing everything else that's part of business school. So don't expect it to be easy is my advice. And students who think, oh yeah, I got into a great school, doesn't matter where I'm from, I'll do great because I'm a member of that school. It really isn't quite true, you can in fact do something about it by getting more advanced experience and know-how before you show up. I don't mean to paint too dire a picture, but yeah, the difficulty level will be higher, but there are ways to address it.
That's right, and one of the ways is by at least considering the Practice MBA Summer Forum. You can get more information about that at practicemba.com. And I do think that the initial point that Ivan opened with, which is that if you can learn the basic skills you're going to need in your MBA, whether it's Excel skills, financial modeling, how to give a handshake in the United States, whatever it is, before you arrive at your business school campus, you'll be so much better off. Now, a couple other announcements. I already told you where you can learn more about the summer forum, practicemba.com, www.practicemba.com. I want to mention that Accepted is offering $100 off any order of $2,000 or more through November 27th, which is next Wednesday. So you have a week to save $100, our Thanksgiving gift to you. And we will be posting the recording of this webinar. Several of you asked about that. Probably will go up sometime next week. And I think Ivan is going to allow me to post the list of resources that he had shown earlier on the slide, right? Yeah, that slide. We're going to get something up with that also, and we'll let you know about it. So with that, thank you very much for coming and for attending. Ivan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise here today. It's been wonderful. And good luck with your MBA application.
My pleasure. Good luck, everyone.